He had two families, two lives, two worlds that never intersected. And for over a decade, Daniel balanced them flawlessly, until the day his worlds collided in a way so brutal, so dark, it shook everyone who thought they knew him. Imagine the man you love, the man you call safe, the man who walks through your door each night, and beneath that ordinary exterior is a secret life so twisted, so perfectly hidden, that every glance, every touch, every word is part of a lie. That's Daniel Hartman. That's the man at the center of this story. And before you hear a single detail, before we unravel the darkness of his double life, do this: subscribe to the Crime Lens. Hit that button and turn on notifications. Because the story you're about to witness isn't just disturbing, it's a blueprint of deception, obsession, and the terrifying power of secrets. Stories like this only come to life here. And trust me, you'll want to see every twisted detail we uncover. Now, let's meet the people who unknowingly lived in the shadows of his lies. First, there's Emily, his first wife. Emily believed in trust, in love, in stability. With her, Daniel was methodical, caring, the picture of a perfect husband. He remembered birthdays, anniversaries, every small nuance of their daughter Claire's life. He left tiny notes on the kitchen counter, reminders for piano practice, sweet little jokes, small gestures that made Emily feel loved and secure. Friends and neighbors thought of him as the model husband, the dependable man who anchored the family. To Emily, Daniel Hartman was safety incarnate. Then there's Mara, his second wife. Mara believed she had found the man who finally revealed his heart. With her, Daniel was warm, spontaneous, affectionate in ways he never was with Emily. He took her on long drives, cooked meals she adored, left little gifts to show attention and care. To Mara, he was charming, relaxed, and utterly devoted. She had no idea she was sharing him with another life, another family, another version of the man she trusted completely. What neither woman knew, what no one could have guessed, was how he managed to be both men at the same time. Two phones. Two calendars. Two sets of friends. Every lie calculated. Every absence explained. Every detail engineered so carefully that even the sharpest observer would be fooled. And that is where the darkness begins. The darkness of Daniel Hartman's life wasn't in a single moment. It was in the years of lies, the quiet manipulation, the invisible walls he built between his families. It was the tension in every phone call, every dinner, every smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the terror of someone who could love and destroy simultaneously, without anyone suspecting until it was too late. For over a decade he walked a tightrope above two worlds. And for over a decade, he hid a truth that was slowly poisoning everything around him, until the day it erupted into horror. And now it's time to uncover it. If you think keeping a single life straight is hard, imagine managing two families, two homes, two sets of responsibilities, two worlds that never intersected. For Daniel Hartman, this was not just a challenge, it was a meticulous obsession. Every day, every hour, every interaction was part of a carefully constructed performance. And in that performance, one mistake could destroy everything. By day, he was the dependable husband, the loving father, the man Emily trusted completely. He remembered birthdays, school events, and dinner plans. He asked about her day in a way that seemed effortless, as though he genuinely cared about every detail. But he always made sure to leave time in his schedule, precise, calculated time, for the other life. By night, in a town 30 minutes away, he became the man Mara thought she knew. The playful, spontaneous partner who could laugh at anything, who could be affectionate without reservation, who cooked her favorite meals and left notes expressing love and devotion. To her, Daniel was everything Emily never saw, everything Emily would never know. Daniel didn't just juggle two lives, he lived in two realities at once. He had two phones, two email accounts, and two calendars that never intersected. Even his friends were compartmentalized. Colleagues who knew Emily and Claire never knew Mara existed. Mara's social circle had no inkling of Emily. He was a ghost with a name, a man moving invisibly through two worlds simultaneously. But living a double life wasn't only about logistics. It was about psychology, control, and performance. Daniel understood people. He understood how they wanted to see him, how they wanted to feel safe, how they wanted to trust. And he used that understanding to maintain his secret. With Emily he was patient. With Mara he was spontaneous. With one he was methodical, with the other he was impulsive. He adapted his personality, his energy, his emotions depending on who he was with, always calculating how to leave no trail, no suspicion, no doubt. Even the smallest details mattered. He memorized traffic patterns, store hours, neighborhood routines. He timed errands to avoid overlap. He left little clues to explain absences, A work meeting here, a volunteer event there. He kept receipts, photos, and digital footprints arranged carefully to maintain the illusion of truth. And yet it wasn't all flawless. The stress of constant deception lingered like a shadow, unseen but palpable. He would sometimes catch himself thinking of Emily while driving to Mara's house, or Mara while tucking Claire into bed. Each thought a reminder of the precarious balance he maintained. The tension was constant. Every phone call risked exposure. Every friend asking too many questions, every family member noticing a small inconsistency, could shatter the delicate construction he had built over years. And Daniel knew it. He thrived on it, in a way the thrill of deception, the power of control, the intoxicating knowledge that no one could touch the truth he held. But secrets have a way of leaking no matter how tightly you hold them. Small cracks began to appear. A call answered too late, a calendar event remembered incorrectly, a suspicious glance from a child who noticed his absence. Nothing overt, nothing immediately damning, but enough to create a tension, a sense of unease, a growing feeling that something wasn't right. Daniel also had a talent for deflection and manipulation. He could charm, disarm, and redirect suspicion with subtle words and gestures. A casual "sorry, I had a work thing" would suffice for Emily. A playful wink and story about a delayed meeting worked for Mara. He was a master of conversation, always one step ahead, always reading the room, always controlling the narrative. And still, despite his skill, living two lives is exhausting. Every night, when he returned home from one family to the other, Daniel felt the weight of his own lies pressing down. Each world expected the full attention of the man he pretended to be. Each world demanded authenticity, intimacy, love, and he had to give it without showing strain, without revealing exhaustion. This double life became a slow-burning trap. The more he succeeded, the more dangerous it became. Because with each lie, each manipulation, each perfectly timed absence, he built a house of cards higher than he could imagine. And houses of cards, no matter how perfectly balanced, eventually fall. Daniel Hartman's secret life wasn't just about cheating or deceit. It was about power, control, and survival. It was about living on the knife's edge of discovery, knowing that at any moment, a single misstep could unravel not only his lies but the lives of everyone he touched. He played God in the small universes of two families, crafting moments, shaping emotions, and pulling strings invisibly. And yet, the question remained, how long could a man live two lives before the pressure, the lies, and the tension became unbearable? How long before one world collided with the other in a way that would reveal the full darkness hidden beneath the smiling, ordinary face of Daniel Hartman? The answer was coming. Slowly, inevitably, like a storm gathering at the horizon. And when it struck, it would be more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Emily Hartman's mornings were quiet rituals of familiarity. She would wake before the sun, stretch, and make coffee while Claire, their daughter, slept in the next room. Emily prided herself on structure, on order, on the life she and Daniel had carefully built together. She believed in stability, in trust, in a love that was visible in small, ordinary gestures. The way Daniel kissed her forehead each morning, the way he tied Claire's shoelaces, the way he remembered even the tiniest details, it all painted a picture of a man devoted, reliable, trustworthy. Emily trusted him with her life, with her heart, with her daughter. She believed that what she saw was the truth. She had no reason to doubt, no hint that her husband was walking through another, entirely separate life just hours away. To her, Daniel was not just a husband. He was the anchor of her family, the calm center of their universe. Even when he left for business trips, she never questioned the timing, the explanations, or the stories he provided. In her world, love was measured in predictability and care. Daniel's absence felt normal, his presence reassuring. And yet, as she went about her days, grocery shopping, school pickups, volunteering at Claire's school, she occasionally noticed small things that didn't fit. A phone call answered too quickly, a text ignored, a small discrepancy in his stories. Nothing alarming. Nothing overt. But the subconscious awareness lingered, a faint shadow in the corners of her mind. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, Mara's mornings were a study in contrast. Mara's world was spontaneous, vibrant, filled with movement and conversation. She worked from home and adored the flexible, intimate connection she shared with Daniel. To her, he was attentive, warm, engaging, the man she believed had finally revealed his true self. He cooked her breakfast, laughed at her jokes, and spent long afternoons talking about dreams, plans, and hopes for the future. Mara didn't see a man balancing two lives. She saw a man fully present, fully engaged, fully hers. She thought their relationship was authentic in every sense, that he was showing her the side of him Emily would never see, the side he had kept hidden. She felt special, chosen, as if she had unlocked a secret in Daniel that no one else could. And yet, Daniel's mastery lay precisely in these two perceptions. Each wife believed she was seeing the full man, the complete truth. Each woman trusted his words, his actions, his routines. Each world was a bubble, carefully constructed and maintained, with Daniel at the center as the invisible hand guiding every interaction. Emily's and Mara's worlds were parallel lines that never met, until the tension of deceit began to stretch them closer. Both women experienced the subtle friction of absence and presence. Emily would notice late-night calls he refused to answer in front of her. Mara would notice sudden moments of distraction when he worked from home. Each incident was explainable, plausible, deflectable. Daniel had rehearsed every excuse, every explanation, every gesture to maintain the illusion. The irony was cruel. The women who loved him most were the ones who unknowingly reinforced the lie. Emily's trust allowed him to slip further into his second life. Mara's affection and attention validated the role he played in that life. He thrived in the belief of each, and each unwittingly became a co-conspirator in his secret existence. Emotionally, both women were tethered to Daniel in ways they didn't understand. Emily, grounded and careful, saw him as her world's foundation. Mara, vibrant and impulsive, saw him as her liberation, her partner in a shared adventure. They lived in contrasting emotional landscapes, yet both were trapped by the same invisible thread, Daniel Hartman. And this is where the darkness grows. The very qualities that made him lovable, attentiveness, charm, dependability, became tools of manipulation. Each smile, each careful apology, each small gift, each act of attention was calibrated to maintain the balance, to keep the houses of both lives intact. The women were not victims of chance. They were victims of precision, of obsession, of a man who could craft reality to his will. As we peel back the layers of Daniel's life, it becomes clear. The tragedy was not just in the secret itself, but in the way it allowed two families to live parallel existences, oblivious to the danger looming just beneath the surface. And when that danger finally erupted, neither Emily nor Mara would ever see it coming. Because for Daniel Hartman, the darkest moments weren't just hidden from the world, they were hidden from the women he claimed to love the most. Even the most carefully constructed lies have weak points. Even the most disciplined secrets leave traces. For Daniel Hartman, the first cracks didn't appear with violence or scandal. They appeared quietly, almost imperceptibly in the mundane routines of daily life. And yet, to the trained eye of a viewer, these subtle fractures are terrifying, because they hint at a darkness that no one in his world was ready to confront. Emily noticed it first, a small inconsistency in a story he told about a work trip. The dates didn't quite add up. A receipt in his coat pocket suggested a lunch he didn't mention. A casual glance at his phone revealed a message preview she couldn't make sense of. At first she shrugged it off. Perhaps she misread something. Perhaps she was imagining things. She wanted to believe in him, to hold on to the version of Daniel that was kind, calm, perfect. But the little anomalies kept stacking. Phone calls answered with hesitation, explanations that felt slightly rehearsed, absences that seemed longer than necessary. Emily began noticing subtle patterns, small hesitations in his speech, a shadow crossing his face when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he sometimes fidgeted with objects on the counter when she asked questions. Each moment seemed insignificant alone, but together they created a sense of unease. A feeling she could neither name nor confront. Meanwhile, Mara noticed her own set of cracks. Daniel's attention sometimes faltered. He'd become distracted mid-conversation, or he'd forget details of plans they had made together. At times, he appeared distant, staring out the window as if he were somewhere else entirely. Mara tried to dismiss it, perhaps he was stressed at work or tired. But she felt it. The creeping sense that he was holding something back, a presence in the room that wasn't entirely hers. And in both worlds, the cracks were mirrored by subtle signs from outsiders. Friends occasionally asked pointed questions, neighbors noticed his odd schedule, colleagues noticed repeated sick days that never seemed to coincide with anything obvious. Each tiny observation was a thread tugging at the fabric of his carefully controlled life. Daniel was aware of these threats. He tightened them, redirected attention, smoothed over explanations, and for a while the world seemed stable again. But cracks grow faster in silence. Lies, no matter how meticulously planned, demand constant maintenance. One missed detail here, one overlooked phone notification there, and suddenly the web begins to tremble. For Daniel, the pressure was immense. Maintaining two worlds meant constant vigilance. One slip could expose not just his lies, but the dual existence of the life he had cultivated so carefully. And as any tension builds in a story, the first real signs of exposure are subtle. A glance, a text, a momentary lapse. Yet they signal a storm gathering. Both wives began to feel it, though neither could name it. Emily's instincts whispered, "Something isn't right." Her trust in Daniel collided with a creeping suspicion she couldn't ignore. Mara's intuition screamed, "He isn't fully mine." Yet both women remained trapped in the routines of their lives, still anchored to the man they loved, still unable to imagine the full truth. The tension was invisible to most, but to an audience, it is palpable. We see the shadows behind the smiles, the calculated glances, the way Daniel navigates two emotional landscapes with terrifying precision. This is the part where suspense grips viewers, the part where you start questioning every action, every conversation, every unspoken word. In a house half a mile apart, Emily began keeping mental notes, little oddities catalogued in her mind. She noticed the precise time he returned from errands, the small differences in stories told, the way he sometimes seemed to listen to voices no one else heard. Mara, 30 minutes away, began noticing similar patterns. A text left unread, a question about plans deflected, a subtle tension when he was on calls. The universe of Daniel Hartman was beginning to collapse under its own weight. And here's the terrifying reality. Daniel had survived this long because people believed what they wanted to believe. They filled the gaps with assumptions. They trusted the familiar. But now the cracks were widening. The small signs, ignored for so long, began to form a map that, if followed, would lead to the heart of his deception. Every glance Daniel gives, every smile, every reassuring word is loaded with suspense. The audience knows he is balancing on a knife's edge. One mistake, one misstep, and the two worlds he built, the families he loved and deceived, would collide in ways none of them could survive. The stage is set. The tension is unbearable. The signs are unmistakable. The cracks in Daniel Hartman's life are no longer subtle. They are screaming for attention. And the question remains, who will see them first? And what will happen when someone finally does? Because when the illusions crumble, the darkness that has been patiently waiting in the corners will emerge, and it will consume everything. The night Daniel Hartman's carefully constructed world fell apart began like any other. But in hindsight, nothing was ordinary. Shadows moved differently, the air felt heavier, and somewhere deep in the corners of two unsuspecting homes, a storm was gathering. Daniel was alone that evening, or so it seemed. The dual lives he had balanced with surgical precision were beginning to intersect in ways he could no longer control. One phone pinged with a message he couldn't ignore. A knock came at a door he wasn't expecting. And as he moved through the dimly lit house, the weight of his own deception pressed against him like a physical force, bending time, space, and the fragile calm he had maintained for over a decade. By the next morning, Daniel Hartman was dead. It wasn't a sudden, public spectacle. There were no sirens outside, no frantic screams, no dramatic confrontation captured on camera. The horror of the crime was intimate, private, suffocating. It began in the place he had considered safest, his home. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. The discovery was made by Emily. She had come home earlier than expected, her heart light with anticipation of a quiet morning with Daniel and Claire. The house was still, unnervingly so. Something felt off. She called his name softly at first, then louder. No answer. Her footsteps echoed in the hallway as she moved toward the bedroom. And then she saw him. Daniel was lying on the floor still. Not the calm, orderly man she knew. Not the steady, dependable presence she had trusted for years. Something about his position, the unnatural angle of his body, the look frozen on his face, sent a chill through her. Emily dropped to her knees, reaching for him, screaming his name, but it was too late. He was gone. The scene was confusing, chaotic, yet eerily clinical. Blood, not excessive but telling, marked the area, a silent testimony of the violence that had occurred. Objects were disturbed. A chair tipped over, a phone on the floor, his briefcase open. It was as if someone had been in a hurry, yet meticulous enough to leave certain things untouched. Forensic teams arrived quickly, but the house seemed almost to resist their scrutiny. The layout, the lighting, the quiet corners, all were a labyrinth of secrets, every inch a potential clue or trap. Detectives moved carefully, photographing the scene, cataloging every item, every mark, every irregularity. Daniel's body told a story, but one that was incomplete, full of gaps that demanded interpretation, analysis, and imagination. Meanwhile, Mara received a call she would never forget. "It's Daniel," said a trembling voice on the line. The words faltered, broken by sobs. Mara's world tilted. The man she believed she knew, the man she loved, the man she had seen only hours before, was gone. And she had no idea of the parallel life she had been sharing unknowingly. The investigation unfolded like a meticulously written thriller. Police discovered subtle clues that pointed to the duality of Daniel's existence. 2 sets of correspondence, conflicting appointments, traces of both wives' lives intertwined in unexpected ways. It was immediately apparent that this was not a simple domestic incident. This was a revelation, a collision of secrets that had been building for years. Detectives interviewed Emily, who was in shock, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mara, equally shattered, described Daniel with a warmth and tenderness that had been part of his second life. Both women were victims of deception, yet their grief was layered with the chilling realization that they had been living parallel existences without ever knowing. Forensic analysis revealed the sequence of events leading to Daniel's death. There were signs of struggle, but subtle. Not a violent altercation, not a chaotic brawl. The violence was precise, controlled, almost surgical in its execution. Whoever had killed Daniel had known exactly what they were doing, and the room itself seemed to bear witness to the horror, every mark, every disturbance a testament to the finality of the act. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Friends and neighbors who had trusted Daniel's face, his smile, his calm demeanor, now confronted the terrifying truth. A man so ordinary could harbor so much darkness. The crime scene became a study in contradictions. Normalcy shattered, perfection destroyed, innocence betrayed. Every object, every line of sight, every shadow seemed to whisper secrets Daniel had taken to the grave. As the police sealed the scene and began piecing together the puzzle, the world outside remained unaware of the darkness that had been living quietly among them. Daniel Hartman's death was not just an ending, it was a revelation. A warning. A story of obsession, deception, and the ultimate consequence of living 2 lives in a world that demands only one truth. The morning after Daniel Hartman's death, the house was a quiet storm. Outside, neighbors whispered, their faces masks of curiosity and disbelief. Inside, detectives moved deliberately, every step measured, every glance searching for the story hidden in the chaos. They were trained to see what others missed, to piece together fragments of truth from a landscape of deception. And in Daniel's home, the fragments were plentiful, layered, and deeply unsettling. Detective Marcus Llewellyn surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. A chair tipped over. A briefcase open, its contents scattered, yet nothing overtly valuable stolen. Blood on the carpet, subtle and telling. And everywhere, small hints of a life that didn't quite add up. He paused over a stack of mail, noticing envelopes addressed to someone Emily had never mentioned. It didn't take long to uncover the first hint of Daniel's double life. Emails, hidden behind a password-protected account, revealed correspondence with a woman named Mara. A life completely separate from Emily, complete with plans, appointments, and tokens of affection meticulously catalogued over the years. Marcus felt a chill. This wasn't just a domestic tragedy. This was deception on a scale he rarely encountered. Interviews began. Emily was fragile, her voice breaking as she described her husband, her daughter, their life together. She spoke of his kindness, his reliability, his attention to detail, unaware that every word she spoke was simultaneously true and part of a lie. Mara, in another room, recounted the warmth, spontaneity, and tenderness she had experienced. Both women painted portraits of a man who had existed in 2 worlds, fully present in each, fully believable, fully deceitful. The detectives quickly realized the complexity of the case. Every day of Daniel's life had been a careful balance between 2 families, 2 towns, 2 sets of friends. Reconstructing it was like assembling a puzzle with missing pieces. Digital evidence was key. Phone logs revealed overlapping appointments. GPS data showed trips that didn't match Emily's story. Receipts pointed to dinners and errands in locations Emily had never known. The threads were there, subtle but undeniable, and Marcus knew that unraveling them would expose not only Daniel's deception but the profound emotional impact on both women. Forensics meticulously documented the scene, cataloging every bloodstain, every object out of place. The violence had been precise, almost clinical. Detective Llewellyn speculated that Daniel had known his killer. The manner suggested control, not random aggression. And yet, who could have had motive, opportunity, and the skill to execute such a calculated act? That question hung in the air like a storm cloud. As the investigation deepened, both families' lives began to unravel. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues were questioned. Subtle patterns emerged, late-night meetings, mysterious trips, and inconsistencies in Daniel's stories. Every person interviewed seemed to reveal more about the double life he had carefully concealed. Marcus realized that the investigation wasn't just about discovering the killer, it was about reconstructing a decade of deceit, mapping the psychological architecture of a man who had lived two lives simultaneously. The detectives uncovered text messages, photos, and notes that revealed Daniel's meticulous planning. He had documented birthdays, events, anniversaries for both families, ensuring no overlap or suspicion. He had gifts for Mara while Emily believed they were merely tokens of friendship or business. He had carefully orchestrated absences, using work trips and meetings as shields. Each detail was evidence of not just deceit, but the sophistication and obsession of a man capable of living in parallel worlds for years. Then came the twist. Interviews with friends hinted at strange behaviors. A neighbor reported seeing Daniel at a store miles away on the same evening Emily claimed he was home. A colleague mentioned unexplained business trips that coincided with Mara's special dates. Slowly, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Daniel Hartman had been living a double life so intricate that no one, not Emily, not Mara, not friends, not neighbors, had suspected a thing. The detectives pieced together timelines, mapping each of Daniel's movements with precision. Security camera footage confirmed he had driven between towns, often arriving at Mara's home minutes after Emily expected him elsewhere. Phone data showed calls made in rapid succession to both wives, carefully timed to maintain appearances. Everything pointed to one chilling truth. Daniel's life had been a masterclass in deception, a dark performance executed with obsessive precision, until it ended in murder. The case shocked everyone involved. Emily and Mara struggled to process the reality of what they had unknowingly shared. Friends and colleagues wrestled with disbelief. The detectives, too, were haunted by the intricacy and darkness of the deception. And the audience, anyone watching, could feel the suffocating tension, the psychological weight of a man who had lived two lives, both so believable that even death couldn't immediately unravel the truth. As Marcus Llewellyn reviewed the evidence late into the night, he muttered to himself, he wasn't just lying, he was living a lie so complete it consumed everyone around him. Every piece of evidence, the emails, texts, GPS logs, receipts, and witness accounts, painted a terrifying picture of control, manipulation, and meticulous planning. And still the ultimate questions remained. Who killed Daniel Hartman? Was it revenge, accident, or something far darker? How much did each woman know without realizing it? And what would happen when the final layers of deceit were peeled back, revealing the full horror of a life lived in parallel shadows? The question hanging over the investigation was simple, yet terrifying. Who killed Daniel Hartman? But the answer was anything but simple. Every person in Daniel's orbit had potential motive. Every lie, every secret, every carefully orchestrated detail of his double life created tension, suspicion, and the possibility of violence. Detectives Marcus Llewellyn and his team compiled a list of suspects, each more complicated than the last. And the first naturally were the women closest to him, Emily and Mara. Both had loved Daniel deeply, but both were trapped in lives they only partially knew. Could the shock of discovery have driven one to violence? Could betrayal, heartbreak, and rage have ignited in an instant? Emily had been portrayed as calm, measured, and devoted. But beneath the surface, the cracks were forming even before Daniel's death. Small inconsistencies in his stories, unexplained absences, moments of doubt, all had left her vulnerable, emotionally frayed. A sudden revelation of Daniel's secret life could, theoretically, provoke an extreme reaction. But detectives had no evidence yet to suggest she had acted out of vengeance. Still, she remained a central figure in the inquiry, both a victim and a potential suspect. Mara, on the other hand, was fiery, passionate, and unaccustomed to secrecy in her relationships. She had believed Daniel's attentiveness and warmth were genuine, but the revelation of a parallel life would be devastating. Could she have confronted him in a moment of anger or desperation? Could the intimate trust she placed in him have turned into a violent confrontation? Again, there was no concrete evidence, but motive alone made her a person of interest. Outside the immediate circle of the wives, there were others who might have benefited from Daniel's death, colleagues, friends, even casual acquaintances. A co-worker, envious of Daniel's steady rise and admired reputation, could have had the opportunity to harm him. A friend, privy to glimpses of his double life, might have acted out of frustration, fear, or blackmail. In Daniel's world, secrecy was power, and power can breed resentment, the kind that festers in silence until it erupts. Then there were subtler possibilities. a neighbor who had noticed his odd comings and goings, a relative who had grown suspicious over the years. Even someone connected to Mara, someone who disapproved of the relationship, could theoretically have played a role. The web of potential motives spread wide, each thread fraught with tension and danger. Detectives considered the nature of the crime itself. Daniel had not been killed randomly. The act was precise, almost surgical. That suggested someone who knew him, someone who could anticipate his routines, someone who could enter his world without immediately triggering alarm. Strangers were ruled out quickly. The killer had to be close, intimate in some sense, someone who understood the rhythm of his life and could exploit it. As the investigation deepened, subtle clues began pointing to interpersonal tensions that might have escalated. In Emily's world, there had been small arguments, nothing major, nothing violent, but enough to suggest underlying strain. She had occasionally questioned Daniel about work trips and phone calls, probing gently but consistently. Could frustration have boiled over? The possibility existed, but detectives had to weigh it against her personality, which was fundamentally measured and composed. Mara's fear, by contrast, revealed emotional intensity that bordered on obsession. She was accustomed to openness and attention, and any perceived betrayal might have struck harder. Her interactions with Daniel's world outside their relationship, fleeting glimpses, odd coincidences, unanswered questions, created a perfect storm for emotional volatility. And in the dark psychology of crimes of passion, a person can act in ways that defy logic, guided solely by rage, hurt, or fear. Beyond the immediate circle, detectives also had to consider indirect consequences of Daniel's dual existence. His double life had involved multiple lies, cancelled appointments, and small deceptions over years. Someone outside the marriage might have discovered a secret, realized the threat it posed to them, and acted. The web of potential suspects was vast, and the motives complex, layered with jealousy, anger, betrayal, and fear. As detectives pieced together timelines, phone logs, and witness statements, the tension ratcheted higher. Every conversation, every meeting, every location where Daniel had been became a potential point of intersection, a moment when two worlds collided. And the most dangerous moments are the ones no one sees coming. The small flash of anger, the quiet confrontation, the private knowledge that drives someone to do something unimaginable. By now, it was clear that Daniel's life had been a ticking time bomb. Every secret, every lie, every dual existence had created circumstances ripe for disaster. And when disaster struck, it did so with surgical precision, leaving detectives with more questions than answers. The dark irony of the case was undeniable. The very qualities that had made Daniel lovable, charm, attentiveness, control, had created a network of motives, a chain of potential suspects, a tension-filled map of human emotion ready to explode. Every person closest to him had a reason to act, and in some cases, that reason was born from love itself. The question hanging over the investigation was simple, yet terrifying: who killed Daniel Hartman? But the answer was anything but simple. Every person in Daniel's orbit had potential. In a story like this, the motive is never simple and the killer is rarely obvious. Every emotion, every secret, every betrayal becomes part of a tapestry of darkness. A tapestry that viewers cannot look away from, no matter how horrifying, no matter how shocking, no matter how human it is. The deeper detectives dug into Daniel Hartman's life, the darker it became. Every revelation was worse than the last. A twist in a story that had seemed almost impossible to believe. And for Emily and Mara, the truths uncovered shattered not just their perception of Daniel, but their very sense of reality. The first revelation came in the form of financial records. Daniel had not only been living two lives emotionally, but also financially. Two separate bank accounts, two sets of credit cards, two mortgages, meticulously maintained. Every expense accounted for, every transaction masked. Gifts, dinners, vacations, all carefully orchestrated to maintain appearances for both wives. He had built entire lifestyles for both, parallel worlds that never overlapped, until now. Then came the digital evidence. Phone logs and emails revealed interactions with others, colleagues, friends, even strangers, who were part of the web he had spun. Some were innocuous, some suspicious, but the volume of communication, the precision of coordination, and the secrecy required to maintain it was staggering. Daniel had lived a life so complex, so perfectly segmented, that even a decade of human scrutiny could barely begin to untangle it. But the most shocking revelations weren't financial or digital. They were personal. Detective Llewellyn uncovered messages that showed Daniel manipulating both wives emotionally, sometimes in parallel. He would console one for a minor disappointment while orchestrating a surprise for the other. He had cultivated a skill for reading people, understanding exactly what they wanted to feel and delivering it, all while keeping the other world alive. Emily learned first. In a quiet interview, as evidence of Daniel's second life was laid bare, she gasped, her hands shaking. All these years he was someone else entirely, she whispered. Mara later faced the same realization. The warmth, spontaneity, and intimacy she had cherished were not entirely hers. They were carefully managed illusions, part of a performance designed to deceive, placate, and control. And there were more twists. Friends and colleagues revealed knowledge of strange absences, odd coincidences, and unexplained behavior that now fit into the horrifying puzzle of Daniel's deception. Each new layer peeled back revealed another lie, another calculated act, another dimension of a man who had lived two lives simultaneously, a master manipulator capable of bending reality to his will. Even the motive for his murder began to clarify. Detectives realized that someone had discovered his secret before he could explain it, confront it, or end it. The act was precise, controlled, deliberate, suggesting knowledge, intent, and possibly revenge. Every piece of evidence pointed not just to the murder itself, but to the emotional intensity that had been building beneath the surface for years. The emotional revelations were devastating. Emily struggled with the duality of grief and betrayal. She had loved him, trusted him, believed in him, and now she had to reconcile the image of the man she knew with the reality of the man he was. Mara's grief was tempered with shock and anger. The intimacy she had experienced, the moments she had treasured, were now laced with the knowledge that she had been part of a life carefully hidden from her. Both women were victims, yet both were also witnesses to a deception that blurred the lines between love, obsession, and control. Even the detectives were unnerved. Llewellyn reflected on the psychological complexity of the case. Daniel Hartman had not only committed a personal crime against those he deceived, he had committed a crime against reality itself. He had made two worlds coexist, invisible to each other, controlled by his actions, gestures, and lies. The murder was the violent punctuation mark at the end of a decade of deception, a final twist that no one could have predicted. The dark irony of the story is clear. Daniel's brilliance in managing two lives became his undoing. The more perfect his deception, the more devastating the revelation. And for viewers, this is the peak of suspense. The moment when everything comes together in a horrifying, almost cinematic collision of truth. Evidence also suggested that Daniel had been on the brink of exposure before his death. Perhaps he had planned to confess, perhaps he had been cornered, or perhaps someone else had discovered the truth first. The timing, precision, and coldness of the murder suggested knowledge and intent. Someone close to him had understood the delicate balance he had maintained, and had chosen to act. As the investigation proceeded, the detectives reconstructed Daniel's final days. Every movement, every call, every lie was mapped. Patterns emerged: late-night meetings, secret exchanges, subtle conflicts. Each thread painted a portrait of a man whose life was a carefully choreographed performance, and whose death was equally deliberate, equally calculated. And so, the revelations continued to mount. Financial fraud, emotional manipulation, hidden relationships, and a murder meticulously executed, each layer revealing not only the man Daniel Hartman was, but the terrifying power of deception itself. For Emily, Mara, and the detectives alike, the truth was unbearable, yet impossible to ignore. The story of Daniel Hartman ends with more questions than answers. Questions of morality, trust, and the human capacity for duplicity. But one thing is certain. In the quiet, the shadows, the spaces between ordinary life, darkness can live undetected, until it erupts violently, leaving only the chilling aftermath behind. The investigation had reached a point of no return. Detective Marcus Llewellyn had pieced together enough evidence to narrow the circle, but the tension in the room was palpable. Emily and Mara sat across from each other, initially separated by distance, now brought together in the chilling aftermath of Daniel Hartman's life and death. Both women were still trying to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the horrifying reality that had been uncovered. Then Marcus began to lay out the evidence. Carefully, methodically, he revealed the financial records, the text messages, the GPS logs, and the photos, the painstakingly constructed proof of Daniel's double life. For Emily, every word was a dagger. For Mara, every fact was a shockwave. They had loved him, trusted him, built lives around him, and yet, in parallel, they had been living illusions crafted by a man they now barely recognized. But the revelation was far from over. Detective Llewellyn turned to the most critical piece of the puzzle: the murder itself. The forensic evidence, he explained, pointed to someone who knew Daniel intimately. Someone with the knowledge to manipulate his routines, anticipate his movements, and execute a calculated act of violence. The room went still. Both women looked at each other, the weight of suspicion palpable. And then, slowly, the truth began to surface, a truth darker than either could have imagined. It was Mara's brother, Samuel, who had been living in the shadow of Daniel's deception. Samuel had discovered the secret life through a series of subtle clues: Daniel's absences, unexplained texts, and financial transactions. Initially, he had confronted his sister, warning her to be cautious. But as the layers of deception unfolded, rage took hold. He saw the betrayal not just to Mara but to the idea of trust itself. The man who had infiltrated their family, manipulating love and loyalty, had to be stopped. Samuel's confrontation with Daniel had not been spontaneous. It had been calculated. He followed Daniel one evening, observed his movements, and waited for the moment when both worlds collided. When he finally confronted Daniel in his home, the argument escalated. Words were exchanged, truths revealed, and in a moment of rage and desperation, Samuel acted. The act was swift, controlled, and precise, a violent punctuation at the end of years of manipulation. The revelation hit Mara like a physical blow. Her brother, the protector she had trusted, had killed the man she loved. Emily, simultaneously grieving and enraged, struggled to process that the man she had married had been living a secret life, and that the violence that ended his life had emerged from the very deception he had orchestrated. Detective Llewellyn explained the forensic evidence in detail: the positioning of Daniel's body, the lack of struggle in certain areas, the signs of control during the confrontation. Samuel had been careful, calculated, not a mindless act of rage, but a deliberate, terrifying decision born from a desire to stop further harm. Emily and Mara, initially frozen in shock, began to confront the implications. They realized that the man they had loved, the man they had trusted, had been living a lie so intricate that no one could have fully imagined it. Every gesture, every act of affection, every decision had been part of a performance. And yet, it was not just deception that had defined Daniel Hartman's life, it was the human cost of that deception, manifested in the violence that ended him. In the aftermath, Samuel was taken into custody. The detectives meticulously documented his account, cross-referenced evidence, and reconstructed the final moments leading to Daniel's death. The truth, though horrifying, was complete. A man had lived two lives, deceived everyone he loved, and met a violent end because of the very web he had spun. Emily and Mara were left to navigate a landscape of grief, betrayal, and shattered illusions. Their worlds, once separate, now collided in the most tragic and intimate way imaginable. They had loved the same man, but in reality, they had known only fragments of the truth. Family and close friends, seeking solace in connection and honesty. And yet, neither could fully escape the shadow of Daniel Hartman. The knowledge of his double life, the emotional manipulation, and the violent consequences remained a haunting presence. A reminder of how fragile trust can be and how devastating deception may become. The story also served as a reflection on human nature itself. Daniel Hartman's life was a paradox. A man capable of tenderness, attentiveness, and care, yet simultaneously a man capable of profound deceit and manipulation. The duality of his existence forced those around him, Emily, Mara, Samuel, and even the detectives, to confront uncomfortable truths about love, trust, and the human capacity for secrecy. The chilling realization remained that darkness often hides behind the most familiar faces, and that the consequences of hidden lives can be catastrophic. And finally, there is reflection. Emily and Mara, bound by shared tragedy, find strength in understanding. They learn that survival does not erase grief, but it can offer clarity. They come to see that while Daniel's life was a masterpiece of manipulation, the truth, harsh, painful, and unavoidable, has a power all its own. In the quiet moments, in the spaces between sorrow and acceptance, they begin to reclaim their narratives, defining themselves not by the man who deceived them, but by the resilience and courage that emerges in the aftermath of darkness. As the dust settles on the life Daniel Hartman tried so desperately to control, one truth remains: secrets have a way of tearing everything apart. 2 homes, 2 women, 1 man living on borrowed time. If you made it this far, then you've walked through every shadow of this story, and I hope it kept you hooked from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this documentary and you want more dark stories just like this, make sure you subscribe to the CrimeLens. It's the best way to support the channel, and it ensures you never miss the next disturbing case we uncover. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, In every quiet street, behind every closed door, there's always another story waiting to be told.